commemorate this channel, I'm gonna start off with a story they gained the name Beltway Snipers. February 16, 2002. 21-year-old cashier 𝐾𝐨𝐧'𝐭 was shot and killed by Lee Malvo at the front of her aunt's home in Tacoma, Washington. Her aunt had been good friends with John Muhammad and his ex-wife and had encouraged her to seek a divorce. So she knew him. This man had obviously shown her signs that he wasn't a good person, and she encouraged the ex-wife to seek divorce from him. March 19, 2002. John Taylor, 60 years old, was killed by a single shot to his chest fired from a long-range rifle as he was practicing his golf on a golf course in Tucson, Arizona. He was on a golf course just going about his business. Apparently, John Allen Muhammad's sister lived near to that golf course. He was just in town visiting his sister during this time of the shooting. There was 2 other deaths and 4 other injuries that occurred in other states from March to July of 2002. This information is coming from Wikipedia, so it didn't specify. August 1st, 2002, John Gita, 51 years old, was changing a slashed tire. His tire was slashed by Malvo, the younger boy. He was in Hammond, Louisiana. So the young boy slashed up his tire, and now he is changing his tire. The boy decided to come out and shoot him in his neck. Unfortunately, bullet exited his back and he pretended to be dead while the young boy steal his wallet. After the boy left, the man ran to the gas station. As he realized he's bleeding, report what happened to him. Luckily, he survived the shooting. On September 5th, 2002, around 10:30 p.m., Paul Rufa, a 55-year-old pizzeria owner, was shot 6 times at close range while he was locking up his store. He locking up his restaurant. It was in Clinton, Maryland. Luckily, he also survived the shooting, but his laptop was stolen, and I mean, it's by the grace of the Almighty that this man survived being shot 6 times at close range. His laptop was found in the car when the boy and the man got catch. September 21st, 2002, at 12:15 a.m., 41-year-old Millian Waldemariam was fatally shot in the head and back with a .22 caliber pistol in Atlanta, Georgia. So now they done gone to Atlanta. They just drive up and down the highway. Waldemar was helping the owner of a Sammy's package store close up for the night when the shooting occurred. Living their lives. These people were just living their lives. Now this is before this whole DMV situation. This is just what was happening during the months prior to this culmination of events. 19 hours later that same day, Claudine Parker, a 52-year-old liquor store clerk, was working in Montgomery, Alabama, was shot in the chest and killed in the robbery. Her co-worker, 24-year-old Kelly Adams, was critically wounded with a shot through the neck but survived. Evidence found at the scene eventually tied the killing of the Beltway attacks, allowed authorities to put all of these things together with Malvo and Muhammad, although this connection was not made till October 17th, which was 4 weeks later. For those particular shootings or killings and woundings, they weren't even suspected. October 23rd, 2002, at 6:30 p.m., 45-year-old Hong Im Ballinger shot in the head and killed with a Bushmaster rifle in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Muhammad and Malvo were later linked to that killing as well. Let's go back now and give the breakdown of the list of events that happened in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. In 5:20 p.m. on Wednesday, October 2nd, 2002, a shot was fired through the window of a Michael's Craft store. This particular one was in Aspen Hill, Maryland. This bullet narrowly missed Ann Chapman, a cashier in a store. Since nobody was injured, they decided, oh, it must have been some stray bullet. And plus they didn't have any evidence of who it was. They didn't have anything. They didn't report it, right? No alarms was raised. It appeared to be random shooting, which is not cool, but what can you do? Approximately 1 hour later, at 6:30 p.m., James Martin, a 55-year-old program analyst at NOAA, was shot and killed. He was in the parking lot of a Shoppers Food Warehouse grocery store, which is located in Wheaton. So the morning of October 3rd now, 4 people were shot dead within a span of 2 hours in Aspen Hill. At 7:41 a.m., James Buchanan, 39-year-old landscaper, was shot dead in Rockville, Maryland. He was shot just mowing the grass. He was at the Fitzgerald Auto Mall. He was just walking. 8:12 now, not even an hour later, a 54-year-old part-time taxi cab driver, Prem Kumar Walekar, was killed in Aspen Hill, again, Montgomery County, while pumping gas in his taxi at the mobile station in Aspen Hill. 8:37 a.m., Sarah Ramos, 34-year-old babysitter and housekeeper, was killed at the Leisure World Shopping Center. She had just got off the bus, sitting down, gingerly reading a book, taking her day off to go and relax herself and read a book. She was attacked. At 9:58 a.m., 25-year-old Lori Ann Lewis Rivera was killed while vacuuming her Plymouth car in a Shell gas station at the intersection of Connecticut and Knowles Avenue in Kensington, Maryland. This is in one day. We ain't even get to the afternoon yet. At 9:20 p.m., Pascal Charlotte, 72-year-old retired carpenter, was walking on Georgia Avenue in Washington, D.C., and he was shot. He died less than an hour later. This is what was going on in D.C. Each of them was killed from some distance by a single bullet. So this person had pristine precision execution. In every case, they strike, they shoot, and they were gone. They were missing. Nobody knew who they was, where they coming from. And it wasn't until the 3rd, that date, October 3rd, when they did all of these killings, that this pattern evolved. They were doing this since February in all different states and all different towns and different places, but these now happen in this concentrated area of place. The chief of police for the Montgomery County, because most of these happening in Montgomery County, started to tell people keep the children indoors or keep the children indoors from school. Children couldn't go outside for recess, not allow them to take the school bus or walk home from school. It was a big deal. October 4th, 2002, a 43-year-old homemaker named Carolyn Seawell was wounded. She was shot in the chest about 2:30 p.m. when she was shopping in another Michael store in this place called Spotsylvania Mall. She was just putting what she buy into her minivan. They came and shot her in the chest. On October 7th at 8:09 a.m. this was when Iran Brown, well, he was 13 years old. He was shot in his chest. His school was in Bowie, Maryland. His auntie who dropped him off at the school, she actually pulled him back in the car, took him to the emergency room. Despite serious injuries and severe damage to major organs, he survived the attack and was able to testify at the trial later on when they had the trial. This was where they find that tarot card. October 9th at 8:18 p.m., 53-year-old civil engineer Dean Harold Myers was shot dead while pumping gas at the 𝐶𝐭 gas station. This was in Prince William County, Virginia, near Manassas. October 14th at 5:15 p.m. 47-year-old Linda Franklin. She was an FBI analyst. She was a resident of Arlington County, Virginia. She was shot dead in the parking lot at the Home Depot in Fairfax County, Virginia. This is just outside Falls Church at the Seven Corners Shopping Center. So she was just doing her daily business at Home Depot. The gas stations decided to put up tarps so that they could have customers come in because nobody wanted to go get gas. At this point, they decided, I guess they're gonna take some time off, so they didn't do any more shootings for 5 days. It's like torture just thinking about, can life go back to normal, or did they just decide to go off into the wilderness and take care of themselves? You just don't know what was on the minds of these people, who they were. At this point, there was still no real answers as to who these people were. October 19, 8 p.m. 37-year-old Jeffrey Hoppa was shot in the parking lot at the Ponderosa in Ashland, Virginia. 80 miles, 90 miles, about 90 miles away from DC. It kind of threw us off a little bit because nobody knew about the other crimes that happened in other places that they had done prior to coming to DC. But at this point, everybody is looking in the area like, okay, the DMV, the person is going to be in the DMV. But now we have a shooting out 90 miles away, which is kind of far compared to the DMV area. It was kind of weird because everybody was like, okay, is this connected to those people? And if so, like, they it took 5 days. There was still so many questions in the air for everybody. Everybody was just so confused. But it was at this particular shooting that the authorities find that letter, the letter that was taped up to the tree. This is what the letter said. It said, "For you, Mr. Police, call me God." That's the calling card. Already we see that in the tarot card that he had left previously. "Do not release to the press. We have tried to contact you to start negotiation. These people took our call for a hoax or a joke, and we've tried to contact you. So your failure to respond has cost you 5 lives. If stopping the killing is more important than catching us now, then you will accept our demand, which is non-negotiable. You will place $10 million in the Bank of America account. We will have unlimited withdrawal at any ATM worldwide. You will activate the bank account, credit card, and PIN number. We will contact you at Ponderosa Buffet, Ashland, Virginia. Telephone number, blah, blah, blah. 6 a.m. Sunday morning. You have until 9 a.m. Monday morning to complete the transaction. Try to catch us. Withdrawing, at least you will have less body bags. If trying to catch us now more important, then prepare your body bags. If we give you our word, that is what takes place. Word is bond. P.S. Your children are not safe anywhere at any time." However, that note was not discovered until after the deadline date. The day after this, the FBI sniper tip line received a call from a male who said, "Don't talk, just listen. Call me God. I left a message for you at the Ponderosa. I'm trying to reach you at the Ponderosa. Be there to take a call in 10 minutes. On October 21st, the FBI team received a call that had been rerouted from the Ponderosa telephone number with a call saying, "Don't say anything, just listen. Dearest police, call me God. Do not release to the press. 5 red stars. You have our terms. They are non-negotiable. If you choose option 1, you will hold a press conference stating to the media that you believe you have caught the sniper like a duck in a noose. Repeat every word exactly as you heard it. If you chose option 2, be sure to remember we will not deviate. P.S. Your children are not safe." On October 21st, in Richmond area, police arrest 2 men with a white van at a gas station. The men turned out to be undocumented immigrants with having nothing to do with these shooters, making people look for a white van. 1 or more white men in a white van. They said they administered them cavity searches and they were remanded into federal custody and subsequently deported. On the next day, October 22nd, a driver, Conrad Johnson, age 35, was shot at 5:56 a.m. He was just standing on the steps of his bus waiting for his route to start in Aspen Hill, Maryland. Unfortunately, Johnson transitioned due to his injuries. At that time is when the chief of police decided to release some of the information about the children are not safe. The crime and the killing wasn't stopping. In some ways, they did want to warn the public about what's going on, but in other ways, they didn't want to comply totally with their demands. Even though they didn't do anything on the 23rd, this was the day that was significant because they finally confirmed that Johnson, the bus driver, was one of the victims of these murderers. Second, they also were able to find shell casings in the Tacoma yard from one of the earlier crimes that connected them and provided a link to them. It looked like they were doing target practice on one of the trees in Tacoma, and they were able to link these shell casings to these criminals. By the middle of October, the coverage of the news was lasting like hours. Like, it didn't even matter. Everybody was tuned in to find out what was going on, what's the update. Even if it's the tiniest bit of information, we wanted to know what was up. As soon as they started to see this pattern, within minutes of any shooting, the police were there. They were blocking roads, cordoning off areas, doing interviews, trying to figure out if they could lock these people in, but they were somehow getting away every time. It said by Friday night, October 4th, the shootings of the 3rd and the 2nd were forensically connected to the same gun. Eyewitness accounts of the attacks were usually very spotty. Nobody knew. They couldn't answer any questions. And there's a good reason for that. And you'll find out in a minute how they were getting away with this the whole time. During this time, police, like I said, were pulling over every white van, every white truck. So what happened is on October 17th, they matched the fingerprints of Malvo fingerprint from the middle school where the young boy was shot, to fingerprints from the Montgomery, Alabama store that the 2 women were murdered during their robbery. And from that point, they now start looking at Malvo. Then with further investigation, they then connect him to John Muhammad. Once they start to link them, they started to get leads from Washington State, Alabama, New Jersey. They learned that Muhammad's ex-wife lived in Clinton, Maryland. This is an area where all of this was happening. This is an ex-wife that had a protective order against him. She had custody of the children. Now information started to surface about a car that was registered in New Jersey, bought by Muhammad. 1990 Chevrolet Caprice. Blue Chevrolet Caprice. This car has been checked by officers when they would block off the areas after shooting several times. But of course, they got away because there was no connection to this car put out into the public, because we're looking for a white van. On October 3rd, the police had actually stopped this car for a minor traffic infraction 2 hours before a shooting. Witnesses that were around that scene of Pascal Chariot were letting them know that they saw this blue Caprice driving away near the scene of that shooting. October 8th, Baltimore Police Department, now investigating that Chevrolet Caprice, said a person was sleeping inside this car parked near I-83, which is the Jonesville Expressway, at 28th Street in Baltimore. The officers were concerned because they were seeing that the driver's license was from Washington State, but the vehicle was registered in New Jersey. Even though it was suspicious, but it didn't fit the description, they just didn't investigate further. They didn't sufficiently question the people extensively, or did they search the vehicle? They didn't do anything. There could have been so many things that could have been stopped if they had did more digging into asking questions and searching the vehicle, but I guess they didn't find it suspicious enough. Finally, on 3:15 a.m. October 24th, this is when this crazy mess came to a close. Muhammad and Malvo were found sleeping in a car at a rest stop of I-70 Myersville, Maryland. Police were tipped off by a person who saw this car. I guess at some point decided to put out to the public, and everybody stopped forgetting about this white truck, and now we're looking for the blue Caprice. Someone saw this blue Caprice parked in this rest stop. Police came swiftly. When they came to the rest stop, they did use their police car. It was an unmarked car, but they used it to block off the exit out of the parking lot. They parked the car sideways between 2 parked cars so that no one could leave. More and more troopers arrived. They were able to seal off all the entrances, the entrance, the exit, all points of exit without them recognizing or seeing what was happening. At this point, SWAT came and was able to arrest them both. How did they carry off these attacks? With a stolen Bushmaster XM15 semi-automatic rifle, as well as a Bushnell holographic weapon sight. This particular combination was effective to have a range of up to 300 meters or 984 feet. So they could shoot from far and not be seen or even exposed. And the reason they couldn't be exposed is because they modified the trunk of the car with a hole that they could lay down from the body of the car into the trunk, point the rifle out, have the scope so they could see and shoot. Even if you probably saw a car like that, you wouldn't even suspect, because the way how the car was modified, nobody could suspect that this car would be the car. You don't see them. They could shoot from far distances with good aim and be unnoticed. So who were these people that was terrorizing people all across the country? The elder was John Allen Muhammad, born John Allen Williams in 1960 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He was born to Ernest and Eva Williams. He and his family moved to New Orleans when his mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and unfortunately she then died when he was 3 years old. After his mom's death, his father left, and he was mainly raised by his maternal grandfather and his aunt. At the age of 27, in 1987, he joined the Nation of Islam and changed his name to Muhammad. During his time with the Nation of Islam, he provided security at the Million Man's March. If you remember, the Million Man's March was in 1995 in DC. Of course, the Nation of Islam have publicly distanced themselves from him and his crimes. In 1999, Muhammad kidnapped his children and took them to Antigua, apparently engaging in credit card fraud and immigration documentation fraud. And during this time is when he met Lee Boyd Malvo, which was his accomplice in these killings. He was a Jamaican child. Apparently he was living in Antigua, and this is how he met Muhammad. Williams officially changed his name to Muhammad in October 2001, and after his arrest he also claimed that Muhammad admitted that he admired and modeled after Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and approved of the September 11 attacks. And remember, this was 1 year after the September 11 attacks that this culminated. Muhammad also indoctrinated Malvo into believing that the proceeds of the $10 million extortion act would be able to allow them to establish like a camp in Canada where homeless children could be trained to be terrorists. They definitely did terrorize us in that time. Muhammad was twice divorced, and the second wife, which is the person that we were talking about that lives in Clinton, Maryland, she sought after and was granted a restraining order against him because she said he abused her. He was arrested on charges of violating a restraining order by possessing a weapon. The defense attorneys in Malvo's trial, which we'll talk about him later, argued that the ultimate goal of the Beltway killings was to murder his second ex-wife, who actually lived in the DMV area. In 1978, Muhammad was enlisted into the Louisiana Army National Guard in Baton Rouge as a combat engineer. He transferred to the regular army on November 6, 1985. He was trained as a mechanic, a truck driver, and special metal worker. He qualified with the Army Standard Rifle, the M16, and he was awarded the Expert Rifleman's Badge, which is the highest of 3 levels of basic rifle marksmanship for a soldier. So he was up there in his ability to use these weapons. His first tour was with the 15th Engineer Battalion at Fort Lewis in 1985. And in 1991 he served with the Gulf War with a company that dismantled Iraqi chemical warfare rockets. For that he received the Southwest Asia Service Medal, the Kuwait Liberation Medal in Saudi Arabia, and the Kuwait Liberation Medal in Kuwait. Okay, in 1982 he was at Fort Ord, California with the 13th Engineers, and in 1983 he was back at Fort Lewis with the 14th Engineer Battalion. Muhammad was honorably discharged from the Army with a rank of sergeant on April 24, 1994, after 17 years of service. He received awards such as the Army Service Ribbon, the National Defense Service Medal, Overseas Ribbon, Non-Commissioned Officers Professional Development Ribbon, and Army Achievement Medal. He had a long, pretty much illustrious military career, very military trained. At the time of these shootings, John Allen Muhammad was 42 years old. Then we talk about Lee Boyd Malvo. Lee Boyd Malvo was aged 16 to 17 during the time of these killings. Lee Boyd Malvo, born on February 18, 1985, to Leslie Malvo, a mason, and Una James, a seamstress, born in Kingston, Jamaica. Una James left Leslie, the father, in 1990. Malvo was 5 years old. So at that time, the mother moved with him to area of Jamaica to be with the sister. They stayed with her sister for 1 year. After the year, they moved back to Kingston and later to St. Martin, where he was 9 years old. He was sent to live with Auntie Marie, where he stayed for another year. In 6th grade, Malvo did so well in his entrance exam that he was sent to York Castle High School. So apparently he was a very smart guy. He was baptized at the age of 14 in 1999, and later he moved to Antigua in 1999 to be with his mother. He registered Antigua and Barbuda Seventh-day Adventist School, and he got good grades and won the school award for 100-meter runs. Him and his mother first met Muhammad, of course, in Antigua around 1999, where they developed a strong friendship. Later, his mother left Antigua for Fort Myers, Florida, using false documents, and left her son go to Florida, set up herself, and then later was supposed to send for him. Muhammad encouraged Malvo to convert to Islam in 2001, and also decided to isolate him from his mom. He cut off their connection. Malvo arrived illegally in Miami in 2001. In December of that year, he and his mother were apprehended by the Border Patrol in Bellingham, Washington State. In 2002, he was released on $1,500 bond and subsequently lived in a homeless shelter in Bellingham with Muhammad. He did end up enrolling in school, and when he enrolled in school, he falsely listed Muhammad as his father. According to his classmates, he didn't make any friends. This connection between this man and this boy was quite tight and got me with one eye open. Like, while in the Tacoma, Washington area, according to his statements to investigators, he shoplifted the MX-15 from this Bullseye supply store and then decided to do target practice in the parking lot of this same store. He practiced his marksmanship at the Bullseye firing range adjacent from the store. Now at this time, both him and Muhammad were prohibited from having guns. Here comes the trial of these two people. In October 2003, Muhammad went on trial for the murder of Dean Myers. This crime occurred in Prince William County near Manassas, Virginia, and this trial was moved from Prince William County to Virginia Beach, 200 miles away. Muhammad was granted the right to represent himself in the defense and dismiss any legal counsel, although immediately switched back to having legal representation after his opening statement. He was charged with murder, terrorism, conspiracy, and illegal use of a firearm and faced a possible death sentence. Prosecutors believe that the shootings were a plot to extort $10 million from the government. The prosecution said they would make a case for 16 shootings allegedly involving Muhammad. The terrorism charge against Muhammad required prosecutors to prove that he committed at least 2 shootings in a 3-year period. Prosecution called more than 130 witnesses and introduced more than 400 pieces of evidence intended to prove Muhammad undertook the murders that ordered Malvo to help carry out those murders. The ballistics test of 8 of those 10 killings in Washington D.C. area and 2 others in Louisiana and Alabama. The car, which was modified so that it could be a sniper car, really, you could shoot from inside the trunk. The laptop computer also found inside the car of one of the victims, as well as it contained maps and icons of the locations of the shootings, witness accounts that placed Muhammad in the area across the street from a shooting or his car near the scene of several shootings. It was a recorded phone call to the police. He was the one calling, "I'm the shooter." You know, his voice was identified as his. Of course, him demanding the money in exchange for stopping the shooting. His defense team asked that they would drop the capital murder charges because there was no direct evidence. However, they did find DNA from him and it was discovered on the rifle. The defense said that Muhammad could not be put to death under the trigger law unless he actually pulled the trigger, and his defense team suggested that Malvo was the one that was pulling the trigger. Since he did not pull the trigger, he would be excused from having the death penalty put upon him. Nobody that testified saw him pull the trigger, and there was no evidence of his prints or anything on the trigger. On November 17, 2003, Muhammad was convicted of all 4 counts in the indictment against him: the capital murder for the shooting of Myers, capital murder under the Virginia anti-terrorism statute for homicide committed with the intent to terrorize the government or the public at large, conspiracy to commit murder, and the illegal use of a firearm. In the penalty phase of the trial, the jury, after 5 hours of deliberation over 2 days, unanimously recommended Muhammad be sentenced to death. On March 8, 2004, a judge agreed with the jury's recommendation and sentenced John Allen Muhammad to death. On April 27, 2005, the Virginia Supreme Court affirmed his death penalty, stating that Muhammad could be sentenced to death because the murder was part of an act of terrorism. The court rejected his defense lawyers, saying that he could not be sentenced to death because he was not the trigger man in the killings. One of the court justices said at the time, with calculation, extensive planning, premeditation, and ruthless disregard for life, Muhammad carried out his cruel scheme of terror. In May 2005, Maryland and Virginia reached an agreement to allow extradition to face now the Maryland charges. He was held in maximum security in Sussex State Prison near Waverly, Sussex County, Virginia, which houses Virginia's male death row inmates. In August 2005, while awaiting execution, he was extradited to Montgomery County, Maryland to face the charges there. May 30th, 2006, a Maryland jury found Muhammad guilty of 6 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Neither Alabama, Arizona, Louisiana, nor Washington moved to try Muhammad themselves. Given his death sentence verdict of murder in Virginia, they did not need to proceed any further. On May 6, 2008, it was revealed that Muhammad asked prosecutors in a letter to help him end the legal appeals of his conviction and death sentence. Wow, this guy is crazy. So that you can murder this innocent black man. An appeal was filed by Muhammad's defense lawyers in April 2008, citing the evidence of brain damage that would render Muhammad incompetent to make legal decisions and that he should not have been allowed to represent himself in his Virginia trial. On September 16, 2009, Prince William County Circuit Court judge set Muhammad's execution date for November 10, 2009. On November 9, 2009, the day before his set execution date, Muhammad's petition for review of his death sentence was denied by the U.S. Supreme Court. On November 10, 2009, hours before Muhammad was scheduled to be executed, his pleas for clemency were made by his attorney and was denied by Virginia governor at that time. Under Virginia law, an inmate is allowed to choose the method by which they would be put to death, either lethal injection or electrocution. As Muhammad declined to select a method, by law, the method of lethal injection was sentenced for him. He was offered a selection of a last meal, which he accepted. His last meal consisted of chicken and red sauce and some cakes. At his execution, Muhammad declined to state anything. You're allowed to make a final statement. He declined. And of course, many of the people that were there to witness his execution were family members of his victims. According to the official statement, the actual lethal injection process began at 9:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. At 9:11 p.m. he was pronounced dead. His body was cremated and the ashes given to his son in Louisiana. Now on to Malvo. Malvo was initially arrested on federal charges, but they were then subsequently dropped. He was transferred to Virginia custody and sent to jail in Fairfax County. He was charged by the Commonwealth of Virginia for 2 capital crimes, being the murder of the FBI analyst in the commission of an act of terrorism and the murder of 1 more person in the 3-year period. He was also charged with the unlawful use of a firearm in the murder of Franklin. Initially, a Fairfax attorney was appointed to him, but later that was changed to a Richmond attorney. Now, while in jail, Malvo recorded a confession to a detective in which he stated that he intended to kill them all. And because of the exposure of all this happening in the Washington area, a change of venue was granted for Malvo. Trial was moved to Chesapeake, Virginia, which is over 150 miles away, and Malvo pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, stating that he was under Muhammad's complete control. One of Malvo's psychiatric witnesses testified that Muhammad had indoctrinated Malvo, had him believing that proceeds of the extortion attempt was going to be used to begin a new nation of pure black only young persons somewhere in Canada. Lee Malvo also admitted that he trained in shooting a real gun at paper plates that represented human heads. He had a long history of antisocial and criminal activity or behavior, including torturing small animals, and this is one of the predictors that is used by criminalists to predict future violent criminals or criminal behavior. On December 18, 2003, after nearly 14 hours of deliberation, a jury convicted Malvo of both charges. On December 23rd, the jury recommended a sentence of life in prison without parole. On October 26, 2004, under a plea bargain to avoid a possible death penalty, Malvo entered the Alford plea to the charges of murdering Kenneth Bridges and attempting to murder Carolyn Seawell while Malvo was in Spotsylvania County in Virginia. He also pleaded guilty to 2 firearms charges and agreed to not to appeal his conviction for the murder of Franklin, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder plus 8 years imprisonment for the weapons charges. However, the life sentence overturned in 2016 when Virginia abolished the life without parole for juveniles. As of 2014, Malvo was incarcerated at the Red Onion State Prison, a Virginia Department of Corrections inmate. On July 29, 2011, Malvo sent a petition to change his name so that he would not be known to fellow inmates, so he could keep his identity private. In September 2012, Malvo gave a lengthy interview to the Washington Post. In the interview, he was then 27 years old. He stated, "I was a monster. If you look up the definition, that's what a monster is. I was a ghoul. I was a thief. I stole people's lives. I did someone else's bidding just because they said so. There is no rhyme or reason or sense." And in an interview on October 24, 2012, Malvo said that John Alid sexually abused him. On May 26, 2017, a federal district court judge overturned Malvo's sentences of life without parole on the ground that it was unconstitutional because Malvo was 17 years old at the time of the killings. However, on August 16, 2017, a Maryland Circuit Court judge decided that this federal court ruling did not apply to Maryland cases since the sentences were not mandatory in the state of Maryland. The 6 consecutive life without parole sentences were imposed after full consideration of the defendant's physical, mental, and emotional state. And he went on to state that the judge who imposed the original sentence considered all the relevant factors at play, and the plain import of his words at the time was that the defendant is irreparably corrupted. On June 21st, 2018, the United States Court of Appeals of the 4th Circuit unanimously upheld a lower court's decision that Malvo's sentences of life without possibility of parole were unconstitutional. On June 29, 2018, Virginia Attorney General said in a statement that his office was seeking to have the Supreme Court of the United States review this case, and on March 18, 2018, the Supreme Court granted certiorari and heard the case on October 16, 2018. On February 24, 2020, Malvo asked the Supreme Court to dismiss his appeal as moot after a change in Virginia state law that made him eligible for parole in that state. The law change made any person sentenced to life as a juvenile and who has served 20 years of that sentence eligible to be considered for early release. So technically, Malvo will become eligible for consideration in 2022. His life sentences in Maryland, however, are not affected, but he is now trying to appeal those sentences as well. On March 10, 2020, Malvo's advisor announced that Malvo was married in a ceremony held in the Red Onion State Prison. So he is now a married man. Tell me in the comments, were you living in Virginia, DC, Maryland at this time? And if not, wherever you were living, if you know about this story, what were your thoughts and what were your ideas of what was happening to us here in this area? I would love to see what you have to say. Thank you all for watching this video. If you made it to this far, you are amazing. I appreciate you. And now I'm going to sage our space. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.